Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar from iFol, in which we're going to be discussing the skills you're going to need to navigate e-invoicing. Now, technology is changing so quickly that it's affecting everything in the finance sector. And nowhere is this having more of an effect than in the digital transaction process of that sort of humblest journey, if you like, of an invoice going between buyer and a seller. Now, this webinar will delve into the benefits, the implementation, and the future trends of digital e-invoicing. So today we've got a fantastic panel of industry experts here, and they're going to help you to understand, embrace e-invoicing, and they're full of tips and guidance as well to help you. We do want to hear from you guys as well, so don't just wait until the end of the webinar to send in your questions. If you think of anything, please just drop it into the chat. We want to get your thoughts about e-invoicing. So my name is Jay Vinderlingham, and as I said, we're lucky to be joined by a panel of experts today. We've got Philip King here. Philip is a consultant focused on cash flow and its role in sustaining small businesses. 45 years experience in credit management. I think he must have started when he was a toddler.
Absolutely.
14 as chief executive of the Chartered Institute of Credit Management. We've got Aaron Ferdinand as well here, enterprise account executive at Causeway TradeX, 14 years experience of working with construction leaders to help deliver accounts payable digital transformation programs. And Faizan Mahmood, senior program lead at CBRE, business leader with expertise in leading fintech transformation e-invoicing solutions across a number of sectors. Good to see you guys. Thank you very much for giving it your time and your insights. A bit of a brief outline for this today. We're going to be firstly talking about why e-invoicing exists and is being adopted so quickly. We're also going to examine the benefits and the pitfalls of e-invoicing. And thirdly, we'll look at how you can get started with the right e-invoicing solution to help you. So let's dive in then right at the beginning, shall we? So what is e-invoicing and why does it exist? Aaron, let's start with you. What's your definition?
So for me, e-invoicing really is taking a process that we know today and streamlining it. And there's two ways of looking at it. There's digitization and digitalization. And there's a very big difference. Digitizing a paper process, i.e. converting it to PDF, to me, that's just digitization. What we really want to do to drive business benefit is move to digitalization. And that's taking a process, digitalizing it to streamline processes, particularly for accounts payable and accounts receivable functions, ultimately.
Okay. Faizan, if you had to explain e-invoicing to someone who had no concept of it, where would you start and what would you say?
Just to add from what Aaron said, so it could mean a number of different things for different companies, really, depending on what the structure is. So it could mean just an automation of how you receive or send your invoices, but it could also in some countries mean being compliant and receiving and sending invoices in a certain format to avoid penalties and fines from the government authorities.
Okay, and Philip, your thoughts if you had to introduce the idea of e-invoicing to someone who didn't know what it was, how would you go about explaining it?
It's a way of streamlining the process of asking your customer for money. So, we're all familiar with the old-fashioned idea of a paper invoice. This just moves it up a level, uses technology to deliver it and produce it, and adds it into the process in a much more seamless way and adds value throughout that process.
Yeah, I mean, it's just in some ways it's kind of where we are in terms of technology, isn't it? It's kind of how we've got to. It's sort of it's sort of catching up with us in terms of how we all do business. I'm going to sort of go to the poll now. We are interested in what when everyone watching this has got a feeling about e-invoicing. So we have got a bit of a poll for you, and the question is, where would you say your organization is in the digitalization process at present? So have a think about this when you do put your invoices in and you work with clients. Are you paper-based? Are you PDF? Are you at the scanning stage? Are you at the scan and capture stage? Or are you fully e-invoicing? We just want one answer from you guys, please. So I'll just repeat the question. Where would you say your organization was in the digitalization process at present? So number one, paper-based. 2, are you at the PDF stage? 3, at scanning? 4, scan and capture? Or are you 5 at e-invoicing? So we will await your results with interest and see what happens there. Oh, right. Okay. So look at that. That was pretty quick results there. So it looks like most people at the scan and capture stage, 43% at scan and capture, and then people at PDF, and then paper-based. That's quite surprising. Let's get a bit of reaction from the panel on that. Then what's your take on where people are? Philip first.
I'm surprised that paper base is 16%. I would have thought that most businesses, even small businesses now, can use software packages like Tide or whatever to raise invoices through the PDF process. So I'm surprised at that. I'm encouraged by the number at scan and capture. Can't see the numbers anymore, but the 40-odd% scan and capture, because they're doing more than just receiving and sending paperwork. They're using it to capture data that they need elsewhere in the business. And I'm sure Aaron will be disappointed at the 7% on full invoicing, because that's where we want people to be.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron, let's go to you. It shows there's a bit of a mountain to climb then in terms of people getting on board fully with e-invoicing. What do you make of that poll?
Indeed. Similar to Philip, I'm quite surprised at the level of paper-based, and I think there was a dramatic drop as a result of COVID when we all had to work from home. So we actually saw a dramatic drop in the shift there to at least the PDF, if not the scanning era. In terms of scan and capture, I'm not surprised that that's the largest, because when we walk into organizations, that tends to be where most organizations are. And that is exactly to my point of digitization as opposed to e-invoicing, which is digitalization. So it's an easy step to digitize. What you then want to do is really drive business benefit by digitalizing. So I'm actually surprised by the paper piece, but not surprised by the others, actually.
Yeah. Faizan, your take on that poll then? Any surprises in that for you?
I think like the others, I'm surprised at paper-based as well. Especially I think during COVID, everyone's moved towards more cloud-based or digital solutions. So shouldn't really expect to see that. But I think I assume these are mostly UK companies, so we don't really have an e-invoicing mandate here in UK. So it's quite in line what you see in UK, really, scannings or /PDF solutions.
Yeah. I mean, do you think some of it might be down to the type of industries that are involved? I know, Aaron, you work a lot with the construction industry. Is it that maybe small businesses in this sector simply find it a bit easier to deal with pen and paper and they haven't quite made the transition yet?
So I think, yeah, we've done some work with a number of consultants actually, and written a few white papers. And when you look at construction specifically, it's one of the least innovative sectors in the UK. And it aligns itself kind of in that guise with fox hunting, believe it or not, and agriculture, in terms of the amount of innovation that's made and the productivity gap that actually is in the sector. So in a way, being focused on construction, it is partly to do with the sector. When you look at other sectors such as manufacturing, far more tech savvy and far more advanced in terms of the world of e-invoicing and typically e-trading as a whole, for that matter.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's dive in and talk about some of the benefits that e-invoicing offers. Faisal, let's come to you first. What would you say was the number one benefit of e-invoicing?
I think the two top benefits I would say is going digital or adopting e-invoicing is the cost savings. So moving from a paper-based or PDF, greatly reduces, or even some cases eliminate that processing costs like storage or printing or computing costs, but also helps reduce the overhead and number of hours spent by the billing and transaction teams. So obviously, and that in turn helps with accuracy and efficiency. And second is the data, because now when you move towards complete e-invoicing format, you get the data you get is very enriched and refined and accurate, and which is very easy for the business when they're adopting this model to turn that raw data into data visualizations. So that helps with your month-end reporting or reporting for the business leadership team. You don't have, everything's real time and transaction based, and in parallel, it provides sort of a digital solution, storage as well, archiving for the businesses. So I think for me, those are two top benefits.
Okay, Philip, but what about you? What if someone was, your elevator pitch, I suppose, to someone who's thinking about this? What would you say was the number one benefit of e-invoicing?
Well, I know we're going to talk about the supplier perception of this and what it does a bit later on, so I don't want to sort of steal the thunder of that. But for me, it's a facilitator for speedier payment because stuff gets into the system quicker, and for suppliers that's really important. And for the buying business, that's also important because it means they can report better payment records. And we've just seen legislation talked about this morning as with the government announcement around the changes to some of the law around reporting on payments. So it's important that they get a good reputation. So that helps. The supply chain relationship, clearly, it's better when the processes are smoother and there's less areas for friction. And the accounts department and other departments are more efficient, as Faizan said, because they've got a seamless system of working all this stuff through without having loads of other people getting involved. I think you've frozen. Oh, you're back.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. I think I should be back now. Okay, so Aaron, if anyone's on the fence, then what reason would you give them for choosing e-invoicing?
Realistically, I think when we speak to organizations, it's never a question of is it the right thing to do? It's more of a question of when. So realistically, it's about where you're at in your business maturity, and we'll probably talk to some of that a little bit later. But I echo everything that Philip and Faizan have said. There's efficiencies from a personnel point of view in terms of cost, of reducing the amount of effort to process the invoices that you receive today. I agree, improve supply chain relationships because the supply chain have greater visibility of the status and stage of their invoices. And ultimately, with the driver that the government are putting in place, in particular in construction as well, of paying more suppliers to term, it absolutely helps with that if you're reducing the amount of time it takes to process an invoice. So I echo everything that the two gentlemen said prior to myself.
Okay. It's interesting that we talked earlier a little bit about sort of British companies and how this might be a bit of a lag internationally. Faizan, I know you're someone who works across a lot of different sectors, a lot of different countries. What's the UK status when it comes to e-invoicing? How do we stack up internationally?
Not yet, to be honest. So UK doesn't really have any obligation for businesses, or there's no current e-invoicing mandate. But I think in near future we could see that changing, because in the last few years we've seen that in Latin countries, China, India, they have come up with their own e-invoicing mandate and countrywide, and really applying penalties and fines if they're not compliant. And now we're seeing that across Europe and Asia Pacific, where governments are either encouraging or most likely actually mandating businesses, again with penalties and fines if they don't go compliant by certain dates, to have the ability to send or receive invoices in a certain format. So I think UK in near future could potentially introduce their own version of e-invoicing mandate just to keep up with global invoicing standards.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron, I suppose is that something that you've recognized in terms of dealing with companies? Do you feel like the UK's got a little bit of a way to go?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the simple way to put it is really what gets measured gets done. And if the government are putting a measure against it, it will get done. Until that happens, there will always be other priorities that are being pushed upon the organizations to set the standard, whether it's in very relevant areas like health and safety. Often will take precedence, which is very important because you want to make sure people get to work and they come home from work, right? But e-invoicing is one that everyone knows is a good thing to do. It's just a question of when and where it sits in their priorities.
Okay, Philip, what's your insight on why you think the UK might be far behind other countries when it comes to e-invoicing?
That's a really good question. I've been involved in e-invoicing forums and such like, some of which involve government and some of which we didn't, probably for the last 15 years. And there's always been a sort of latent desire to engage and to push it. but it's never got much beyond that desire and hasn't really done anything tangible or specific, and it's been left to the industry to try and drive that, and that's always difficult because industry has different agendas and different solutions and so on. But interestingly, in the press release this morning from government about what it's doing around late payment and stuff, mentioning that one of the ministers said, you know, and e-invoicing is part of this. So they're definitely now recognizing that, and they're saying they're recognizing that e-invoicing is a key element. And I think Faizan's right. I think we'll see much more of that coming through in the coming months as they recognize that e-invoicing can play its part and make business more efficient and help people get paid faster and so on.
Yeah, I suppose it's as you said, Aaron, it's a little bit like if you don't measure it, you're not serious about it. It'll only take, I suppose, a bit of a lag in UK PLC for people to understand that actually maybe e-invoicing could be part of the issue. Right. Well, I suppose we'll watch this space in terms of what it means from the government side of things. But I suppose when it comes to thinking about people who haven't quite adopted e-invoicing, you have to reflect about why that is. I mean, is e-invoicing for everyone? I mean, what are the limitations, if any? Aaron, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think I kind of alluded to it that everyone thinks it is a good idea, and there are some valid limitations for organisations. Now, some of those that we found or I found over the years is technology itself can be a challenge, because when we're talking about e-invoicing, we're talking about getting invoices in a data file format, in effect, to remove the rekeying and manually matching of invoices. But ultimately, you want to get that data into your end state system, whether that's an ERP, finance system, whatever system of record you call it. In some cases, the ERP that people are using is outdated and doesn't support electronic trading. So that is a potential barrier to entry. In addition to that, there is just sometimes a human factor that people are resistant to change. I've always done it this way, so why should I change? Yeah, there's always that element to consider. I mentioned previously business priorities, and also sometimes ownership. And this can tend to be in the smaller companies, particularly in construction, is e-invoicing isn't just about focusing on yourselves. As Philip alluded to previously, there's an impact on the supply chain, and you have to take the supply chain on the journey with you. And often in the smaller businesses, there may not be somebody that is specifically responsible for supply chain engagement or procurement functions. And they typically are the ones that would partner with someone like Causeway as a technology partner to roll out an invoicing platform. So there are some challenges that are valid. Others are more down to priority and selecting what you're working on at the time.
Yeah. I mean, Faizan, you must have come across some firms or some service providers through your history that might have been a bit resistant to e-invoicing. Well, what are the limitations that they've come to you with?
So I think the two for me I've come across is the technology point, which Aaron mentioned. So I've come across same like many companies which have an ERP system using finance or company-wide, but it's not modern enough, it's not cloud-based to facilitate that e-invoicing bit. So when they do look at the invoicing, they realize it's end up costing a lot more than they need to or they would like to. And second, I think is we talked about the benefits of suppliers, faster invoices means faster payments, but at the same time, especially for larger organizations, you have hundreds of, if not thousands of suppliers, and each supplier would normally have their own system of, raising and sending invoices and receiving invoices. So, in which they would prefer to use that across the whole board. So if you're introducing a new system where you're asking your suppliers to send invoices, it's sometimes difficult to get them on board. So that's the key challenge that we've seen across many different companies.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned something about software and cost there. I mean, is cost something that might play on people's minds, Philip, when it comes to adopting this? Many firms might feel like it's not worth them doing it.
Well, cost is always an issue, isn't it? Particularly for small businesses. And I think one of the problems is that for many micro businesses and the smaller end of the SME sector, e-invoicing is a dark art. they hear about it, but they don't really know what it means, and they continue to do what they've always done, and it's worked. So if it's not broke, why try and fix it? So there's an element of cost to it. There's an element of uncertainty to it, and there's a sense of this will be more work for us. Even if it ends up being easier, there's a lot of work to get to that point, and what I do now works. So why do I want to change it?
Yeah. I want to talk a bit about something that you mentioned, Aaron, which is about workplace culture. I think a lot of places might be, as you say, they might push back on that because it's, as you mentioned, Philip, it's something they haven't done before. How hard is it to win over a business if they're culturally opposed to this kind of thing, even if it's probably in their benefit in the long term? Aaron, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I think I maybe alluded to it slightly that they will understand and agree it is a good idea. It's just about when, right? When's it going to be right for their organization? What I found has been probably the most successful route is to let them know they're not alone, right? And get them speaking to other people that were in a similar position to themselves and kind of took the leap of faith, trusted in a technology partner, and have rolled out and have seen the benefits of that. And I know Faizan can talk to that around CBRO specifically. And I think that's the best way, is people will speak to people that are in a similar position to them, and they can understand and be empathetic with their position, their thoughts. And I found that's the best way to move it forward for organizations to make a change.
Yeah, Faizan, is that a fair comment, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to the culture point, there's also an element, especially across European Union countries, where we have work councils in manufacturing and construction, retail industry, especially. It's kind of like a union. So I've seen that across Starbucks. They were quite resistant to the changes we're implementing because they knew the changes coming, but of course they are reluctant of that change coming, losing the work power and manpower they have. But obviously at the end, it's in the best interest of the business and the people as well, automating that overall process.
Yeah. Philip, any thoughts about how you go about changing the culture if an organization is fundamentally hesitant to take that leap of faith?
Well, I think it's as Faizan and Aaron have said, it's around persuading them of the benefits and getting them to believe that now is the right time. Because I think Aaron's right that most people believe it's a good idea. It's just we'll push it into the long grass for a while and then get it out again. But I think it's like all these things. You've got to sell the benefits and get people to realize what they are. And there are clearly benefits to the buyer in terms of how they manage their payments process and so on. But there are also many advantages for suppliers. And that works to the benefit of the buyer too, because they can use that as a motivator. And for suppliers, once they realize the benefits, I've talked to loads of small businesses that have seen massive benefits from engaging in e-invoicing systems.
Yeah. I think some of the hesitancy might be from some of those smaller firms, as you said, that are not as exposed to the advancements in software technology. There might be have sort of those human fears, if you like, of this might take work away from people in my team. Could this lead to job cuts? That kind of thing. I mean, what do you make to those kind of arguments? Faizan, let's go to you first this time.
No, that's true. I think for small organizations, like you said, it's kind of like a dark art for them as well, so they're not sure. And also it doesn't help that in UK especially, it's not exactly compliant, so they don't really see that as we don't really need to spend money here or do this piece of work unless we really have to. And I think for large organizations, the challenge for them is money, because sometimes you have different business priorities, but also the complexity you see across different segments, across different entities. You have the volume of invoices too high, that sometimes the scope of the work can become too big because they would have so many other issues along with the invoicing, like purchase orders or sales reference orders and so on, or cash flow management as well that comes along with invoicing. So yeah.
Aaron, is this something you've come across, that people come to you saying, I might have to make job cuts because this technology will be taking work away from my human workforce?
So I think, yeah, in reality, that is a potential scenario that can play out. It can take away people's jobs. But what we've found actually is you look at it in two ways. it really depends on where your business is at and its maturity, and I will talk to that a bit later. But if your organization is growing rapidly, what you want to do is maintain the staffing level that you have, as opposed to reducing the staffing level. And that means you keep the knowledge in your business. But ultimately, what we often are trying to do is make that person as valuable and work on as many value-added tasks as possible. What e-invoicing is really taking away is the non-value-added tasks that are being performed. And we want to make those people shining stars in organizations, not to be leaving those organizations. But in some cases, where processes are so inefficient currently, there will be the reality that some people will lose that particular role. But what we do often find is they end up being redeployed in the organization elsewhere.
Yeah. Philip, is this something you've come across in terms of a fear about moving to e-invoicing, that actually it might lead to layoffs?
I mean, this is a fear across all technology, isn't it? Whether it's taking guards off trains, which we've heard so much about, or whether it's machine learning to handle, administrative processes that would previously have been done by individuals, and that always brings with it a fear. But I think that from what I've seen, that smart organisations recognise the skills and the talent they've got, and they use them more effectively once they've got systems to handle some of the mundane tasks that were previously being done. And if you can handle a lot of your processing stuff through automation, then the people that were doing that are now free to add value to customers, to improve your customer service, to improve the analysis you do, and all the other things that businesses require that often they don't have time for. So, in some businesses it will be, this is the way we can cut costs. But for the smart-minded ones, this is around how can we get more value from our workforce and use them more effectively.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And the point about technology moving at pace is also a really pertinent one. It leads to another question, I suppose, about how robust a system is. I mean, we saw just last week, I think it was, at TfL's Transport for London's database was hacked, information database with some payment details going out. And they're obviously a big organization in the centre of London with thousands and thousands of people and account details there. Is there a risk when it comes to e-invoicing about fraud, hacking? How robust and how resilient is the system? Aaron, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So I think I can only speak on sort of behalf of Causeway, but security is of paramount. To put it into perspective, in the construction sector, going through our TradeX platform alone, there's over £22 billion worth of construction spend going through this platform on an annual basis, and there's over 60,000 organizations that are transacting on this platform. So making sure that is secure and isn't open to fraud is of paramount importance. So we think about things like data security, making sure we've got the right ISO standards, supporting and making sure we're applying GDPR to it. But then also now you have Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus that's coming into play. And we're making sure that from a platform point of view, multi-factor authentication are all at play to make sure everybody's data is safeguarded, because it's of absolute paramount importance. And by having systems in place, it reduces the openness to fraud, because the system is almost looking at it and saying it's either right or wrong, right? I'm matching data to data. Does that invoice match what I'm expecting it to do on that purchase order? Therefore, I'm expecting an invoice with that PO number from that supplier to come into my system. Whereas with human error, a single rekeying error of a single digit or number can make a world of difference. So we're trying to lessen that and lower the likeliness of fraud.
Okay, Faizan, is that something that I'm interested to know when you've dealt with companies internationally, how they deal with this risk, the security risk around e-invoicing?
So I think all technology products are generally susceptible to hacking, but when it comes to fraud or tampering, e-invoicing solutions, even they're cloud-based but very secure, like Aaron said, and the e-invoicing format is generally in XML or Payable-based, and is transmitted in a secure encrypted channels. So, and for us as a general business users, it's not exactly readable, maybe for a developer or engineer. So all the information is very encrypted. So it greatly reduces that risk of, fraud or fraudulent emails asking you to change bank details or fake invoices and so on, because all the information has been transmitted from your suppliers, from their system to your system in a secure method, and furthermore, it's just getting processed by the system itself and ready for payment. So it reduces the human error bit as well, like we talked about.
Yeah, I mean, I do think obviously human error is, it's part of, going through history. It's been part of human nature, literally.
Yeah.
But I do think there has been some reticence in terms of people being a bit wary around software and machinery. I just think back to the post office scandal and the Horizon IT system. Do you think people, Philip, are fully trusting of new technology, even if it does have these safeguards that Aaron was saying?
No, I don't think they are, and nor should they be, to be honest. But I think, even if you have no invoicing, you're still susceptible to push payment fraud, to fraudulent instructions from employees, to the finance director to issue payment to somebody, and all the other things we see going on within fraudulent activity. And I think you're better off if you've got a system that you can rely on and can convince you that it's trustworthy and is inherently applied across all the transactions than you are if you're doing stuff piecemeal, ad hoc, and manually. And if you've got a business like a system like TradeX, which has got 60,000 users and is putting £2.2 billion a year through it, or whatever the number was, Aaron said, then that generates a level of trust. And you have to have a trusted partner. You have to believe that they are doing what's right for you and are taking necessary steps. But once you are, then you're probably in a better position than you are if you're doing stuff manually locally.
Yeah. Okay, that's really good, and hopefully that will put some people's fears to bed about the technology aspect of it. I want to talk. You hinted a bit earlier, Philip, about the relationship with suppliers, and when it comes to e-invoicing, how are suppliers affected, and how does e-invoicing affect businesses' relationship with you, and is it hard to get them on board?
Well, I mean, in the first place, they've got to go through a step of engaging into the system, whatever the system is. So they've got to put their invoices into that system, and there will be a process which Aaron could talk about better than I can. But once they have, then there are huge benefits. I mean, in the first place, if it's gone through a system and it automatically matches purchase order to goods received to invoice and so on, it means that invoices can be approved much more quickly, and you remove the need for businesses for paperwork to be sent all over the country for people to sign off and so on. The result of that is that payment is much more likely to be to terms, and that's really important. One of the big things, and Aaron touched on it earlier, is that as a supplier, you've got visibility of your invoices. You can go into the portal and you can see that your invoice, is yet to be approved or has been approved or is on the payment run next Wednesday or wherever. And that's a massive confidence boost for your own cash flow. You can see when the cash is coming. It saves you the grief of having to ring up or email the buyer saying, where's my invoice? Has it been approved yet? And so on. So that visibility is really important. And with that confidence comes an improved supplier-buyer relationship. And those are really important because, suppliers like to deal with buyers they can trust, they like, and treat them well. So when you build that sort of more partnership approach and take away from the sort of transactional approach, then that's better for all parties. And you end up with sustainable long-term relationships which allow businesses to build and develop. And I think, getting confidence in your cash flow is really important. And also, I guess as a final point, if there's something wrong with the invoice, you know it straight away. So it bounces straight back and you say, I've got this wrong. And even before that, you can't put an invoice in which doesn't meet the order number format that is required. So if you've miskeyed something, it'll reject it, it won't even let you put it in. So you know that on day 0, not day 30, when you're chasing payment and someone says to you, it's not going to come.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, but it's very succinctly put. Faizan, your thoughts about bringing suppliers on board? I suppose faster payments, fewer mistakes is a good way of getting people to the wicket, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think it helps with the business as well, with the deliveries of goods and services. But to the point Philip just mentioned about the system rejecting, which is a really good point. Now there's, the systems are so advanced that you could customize to your business needs and set sort of parameters, whether such as, if there's no purchase order, the invoice will be rejected or on hold, or there's approval, or it's missing a work reference, or so on. Which helps, of course, with the, again, faster invoicing and then faster payments, and helps build that trust between the supplier and the customers, really.
Yeah, and that's key, isn't it? That trust aspect. Aaron, do you want to add anything on the relationship with suppliers?
I think it's a very important point, because you can have the best technology in the world. If you don't have your supply chain engaging with it as the buyer, you're not going to get the benefit. So we put massive emphasis on thinking from the supplier's point of view of what's in it for me. And when you often speak to e-invoicing providers, they'll talk about an onboarding process for the supply chain. That's typically a one-time exercise. What we have done is we've developed a community management team that is always available to engage with your supply chain, not just to onboard them initially, but they have a constant link into a support team. And as you go through your evolution of adoption with the platform, to start adding more and more functionality, such as I'm now going to start sending you purchase orders through this platform. I now want to capture your carbon data through this platform. The community management team are on hand at all points of time to reach out to the supply chain, to share that communication with them. And as organizations have a change in their supply chain where they've changed who they trade with, they want to bring suppliers in and take suppliers off the system. They have a support network to do that, that's available all working hours to work with the supply chain as well as the buyer. So ours is a constant as opposed to just a one-time exercise, because it's so important to keep the suppliers happy, getting them using the technology.
Yeah, okay. So I think a lot of people now might be sort of thinking, right, well, this is something I do want to get involved in terms of my organization. What's the starting point for adopting e-invoicing? If you realize you're at that point, you're at the point where you want to take that leap of faith, Aaron, you spoke of, what are the first steps that people need to go through?
So I think it's absolutely understanding, taking stock of where you're at the moment. And your poll would have gone some way to getting people to understand where are they. Have they digitized? Have they not? Or have they started the digitalization journey? So if taking stock is the first thing to do. Now, the way that we would typically engage with an organization, and recommend that organizations do this whether they're speaking to a technology partner or not, is undertake what we call a discovery process. It may also be known as a time in motion study. It says, well, if I was going to invent e-invoice or invoicing today, I wouldn't invent that we take it from a computer system, print it out onto a piece of paper, put it in the post to somebody to then key back into a computer system. The natural scenario is, let's get system to system talking. But what we ask people to do is look at your current process, understand what you're doing and how many touch points are there along the journey from the day of the life of an invoice that's coming into your business. Once you understand that, go, well, wouldn't it be better if I could take it from 17 steps to 3 or to 1? And that's the way we say, and that gives you a benchmark of where am I at and where do I realistically think I could get to in 3, 6, and 9 months. That creates the phasing of your project, and that allows you to establish, do I have a business case here that justifies adopting and partnering with a technology partner to streamline my invoicing process and becoming truly invoicing user.
Yeah. Okay. I suppose, what if you're someone in your organization, you can see the benefits, but you're not the one who holds the sign-off pen in your business? How do you build that business case to get your company to adopt it? Philip, do you want to take that one?
I'll defer to Aaron on that,
Oh,
because
okay. Right.
he's involved in stuff all the time and I'm not, so he can answer that much better.
All right, Aaron, do you want to quick touch on that one then?
Yeah, so I think actually in terms of that discovery process I mentioned, the time and motion study, what you then actually do is you're looking at, for example, a team of 10 accounts payable clerks and understanding how much of their time they are spending on that particular task. And then you can attribute that to a value to say, okay, by putting in e-invoicing, I can now make my accounts payable team 50% more efficient. There's 50% more value I can bring back into my business because the technology is going to take care of the other 50%. And then you can attribute that to a monetary value or a business benefit.
Okay. I mean, I suppose, Faizan, if I just ask you, I mean, what would you say to someone, the cost of not changing versus the cost of staying as you are in terms of the future?
I mean, it will all depend. It will vary depending on your organization structure, how many people you have in your billing team, what's the volume of invoices, and how many entities or segments they're looking after. So it would vary very different, and which essentially in the end, which solution provider you go for. Most SaaS solutions are ranging a similar mark, but still it would vary transaction. And if you want to have any add-on applications in addition to your invoicing solution.
Yeah. Philip, I suppose it's all about the benefits of e-invoicing versus the current solution, is it, versus what people are doing at the moment. Would you agree?
Yeah, it is. I mean, Aaron articulated this really well. When he talked about the steps that are involved in a process, and if you can, get those down to, two steps rather than 17, then it's a no-brainer, isn't it? Why would you not want to do that? And if in doing that you also increase the accuracy and reduce the error rate and speed up the process, that's just additional factors to say, this is clearly the right thing to do. And let's not forget that that government has this on their agenda. They are aware of it. We're seeing around Europe e-invoicing becoming mandatory, and there's no reason to suggest that the UK won't follow suit at some point. So whether that's a year away or 5 years away, it will happen. And so before it happens, let's be on the train rather than running after it, trying to jump on.
Yeah, that is great, isn't it? I suppose in terms of taking stock of where we are in terms of our chat today, it seems that people, think back to our poll, people were mostly at the scan and capture stage. So we've still got a bit of a way to go, and obviously a lot of people still using paper. So in terms of jumping on that train, there's still a bit of a way to go in terms of getting us to get there. And hopefully, you said like government are on the case with it now. Do you think that will help to expedite things?
Well, if government mandates it and they put monitoring measures in place and so on, then as the guys said earlier, that will accelerate it massively. And if you have to, if government is saying that you have to offer and use e-invoicing, for public sector procurement and so on initially, and also for private to private sector, then that becomes a real driver. And let's not forget that the invoicing system also enables you to produce other reporting requirements. So the payment practice reporting that businesses have to do every 6 months, VAT reporting, carbon footprint reporting, all of these things can be captured through e-invoicing. So it's not just around the invoicing process per se, it's also around other areas that government is looking at and requiring people to report on.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, we're very nearly kind of approaching the end now, but before we finish, I'd just kind of like to go around each of you on the panel just to give everyone one sort of takeaway key piece of advice about e-invoicing that people could kind of take away with them. So Aaron, do you have any thoughts to it you want to wrap up with?
Yeah, I think choose a partner that you're trusting in and trust their guidance. They do this every single day, right? And they're not reinventing the wheel. So I would say it's not as scary as you think, and you won't regret it.
Okay, Faizan, any final thoughts from you?
E-invoicing comes with its own benefits, but also with its limitation and challenges. So it's very important as a business, make sure you have a clear strategy and scope of work in place before you go down that route of implementing e-invoicing and spending hundreds of thousands.
And Philip, we'll give the final word to you then. Last piece of advice, last final thoughts of wisdom about e-invoicing that you'd like to leave people with.
Do your research, understand the benefits and the pitfalls and drawbacks, but above all, recognize the benefits it can bring to the whole supply chain and how it can improve the supply chain relationships.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much to our guest today, Philip King, consultant focused on cash flow and its role in sustaining small businesses. Aaron Ferdinand, Enterprise Account Executive at Causeway TradeX. Thank you very much for your time. Faizan Mahmood, Senior Program Lead at CBRE. Thank you guys for your time and for joining us today. You can find out more information about what we've discussed today on the iFol website, along with information on iFol membership as well. This webinar will also be available on the website too from tomorrow, so please share it. I'm Jay Viderlingham. Thanks again for your time and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.